So, as we continue our series looking at gender from a Catholic perspective, right, I want to continue to recommend two really good books on the subject, and that is Ryan Anderson's book, When Harry Became Sally, responding to the transgender moment. Ryan Anderson does an excellent job in this book, very thorough, very thick book too. And Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. Most excellent book. I think both of them were banned on Amazon at one time. Isn't that interesting? The forbidden books that tell you real things about studies and stuff. Who would have thought? We, however, have been reading through Jason Everett's book, Male, Female, Other, A Catholic Guide to Understanding Gender. We start with Chapter 4 this evening. The claim that sex is assigned at birth. And so the idea is that it's merely assigned, right? And we could have any gender. There's as many genders as personalities. You know, we used to say personality to mean personality. Now people use the word gender. Well, some anyways. So many definitions. It's not a monolith. There's a lot of infighting and debate within the LGBT community itself on all kinds of terminology and definitions and so on and so forth. It's really hard to pin down. What's not difficult to pin down is the way that our society has looked upon and understood human nature. And particularly the Catholic Church has a very specific theological understanding of anthropology, and as such, it's very nuanced. It's very impressive, really. So here's the claim. Looks like it's 3 paragraphs worth of claims. So keep that in mind. That this isn't the author speaking. This is a claim. According to Dr. Deanna Atkins, one's internal sense of gender is, quote, the only medically supported determinant of sex. It is counter to medical science to use chromosomes, hormones, internal reproductive organs, external genitalia, or secondary sex characteristics to override gender identity for purpose of classifying someone as male or female. End quote. Well, this Dr. Adkins is a real piece of work. Therefore, when a child is born and a doctor assigns the child a male or female, such a premature judgment can be damaging to the individual. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, quote, sex designations on birth certificates offer no clinical utility, and they could be harmful for intersex and transgender people, end quote. Because some boys have vaginas and some girls have penises. We cannot know someone's sex unless they tell us. In the words of trans activist Decker Moss, quote, imagine a world where gender isn't left up to doctors or judges. One where we are all able to claim our own gender based on what's between our ears, rather than have it assigned to us based on what's between our legs. Here we're all able to self-identify as male or female, as both or neither. I have a hard time saying that stuff with a straight face. Okay, so that's kind of Jason Everett setting the stage for what he wants to talk about. These kinds of things, right? Although gender theory proposes the idea that every child is assigned a sex at birth, this language originated in the medical field for babies who are born with genital ambiguities. So in intersex conditions where there's actually ambiguity that's going on, it's very important that we understand that when it comes to, because of the ambiguity, being assigned one or the other is not a clear indication of necessarily what's going on. Further testing needs to be done. But in terms of the birth certificate, there might be something that's initially assigned for further testing. But for most of us, we don't require further testing. So there doesn't need to be an assignment per se. It's just recognition of, are you part of the male component of our sexually dimorphic species, or are you part of the female component of our sexually dimorphic species? That's all that indicates on the birth certificate. That's it. In such difficult situations, doctors and parents were left with a difficult task of discerning how to proceed. Dr. John Money believed that clinicians had a responsibility to assist parents in assigning such children a sex and then establishing a plan of hormonal and surgical interventions if necessary, followed by social conditioning to ensure the child would live out his or her gender role. I don't know if he goes into it or not, but John Money had trotted out a twin study where one of them had a botched circumcision. They had a rare I forget what it's called. But anyways, they had a condition they thought that circumcision would help, but it was a botched circumcision. The child became infected or something, and they had to just completely castrate the child. And then the parents of the twins saw John Money on some show and decided to allow him to help. And he said, "Oh, we're just going to raise him as a girl." Yeah, one of them died as of a drug overdose, and the other one killed himself. Very unfortunate. But this was trotted out as evidence or as a success story for John Money's theory. Thankfully, many medical professionals and clinicians today take a more cautious and less invasive approach. When a child is born with ambiguous genitalia, a team of specialists will assist the parents in navigating this challenging situation. Often this will involve the consultation of experts in genetics, urology, endocrinology, psychiatry, and pediatric medicine. If the sex of the child is not obvious, sometimes an ultrasound or chromosomal, hormonal, or genetic testing may give the parents greater clarity. However, 99.98% of the time, the genitals of the child clearly indicate his or her sex. So this is a rare condition where there's ambiguity. To apply the language of assigned sex to children when their bodies are clearly male or female is a linguistic maneuver by gender theorists. Despite the binary nature of human sexuality, we are a sexually dimorphic species, gender theorists treat every child as sexually ambiguous. Margaret McCarthy summed up their intentions well, quote, "It is as though we are all effectively hermaphrodites, regardless of our anatomy or other physiological makeup," end quote. Supposedly all that a parent or obstetrician can do is assign a sex based upon their best guesses as an external arbitrary authority. But if sex can be assigned, it can be reassigned. This is the ultimate motive behind adopting this language. For a child whose sexual development in utero is typical, doctors and parents are not assigning a child's sex, they're recognizing a biological reality that was determined long before the child's birth and identify it. Hey, Captain, how's it going? You mean a child is born with malformed genitals? Yeah, this is the case that's talking about. I've heard people use that as an argument to claim there's more than because of the okay. So at the beginning of our reading in our book, Jason Everett was basically talking about how in the cases of ambiguity, like an intersex condition where and there are very interesting, though may seem kind of disturbing, where there would be a vaginal opening, but where, say, the clitoris would be, you have a full-fledged penis or something like that. There can be ambiguities and things like that. That's not to say there's more than two genders. It just means that something went wrong. We are a sexually dimorphic species. So doctors aren't assigning sex. The doctors are like what we put on the birth certificate, male or female. We're just recognizing, are you part of the female component or the male component of our sexually dimorphic species? So it's a recognition of biology. And so for the case of the ambiguity, there may be a temporary assignment while research goes on, but this is like less than 0.02% where there's actual ambiguity. But the author's point is basically everybody is being treated as if we're being assigned. And one of the earlier quotations, which I thought was kind of disturbing, comes from Dr. Adkins, who said the following, and this is what he's responding to in this chapter. The only medically supported determinant of sex is one's internal sense of gender. Isn't that interesting? So, as I premised at the very beginning, even underneath the so-called LGBT umbrella, there's so much variation of ideas that are actually happening that contradict each other. So there's a lot of infighting, for instance, underneath the LGBT umbrella amongst themselves concerning some of these things. Some people will tell you, well, sex is biological and gender is a social construct. But then you have Dr. Atkins, who is saying that the only medically supported determinant of sex is one's internal sense of gender identity, which contradicts the idea that, sex is biological and gender is social, which I reject both of these notions. I think they are, according to Catholic teaching, they are absurd. But yeah, there's any number of people saying stuff like for example, someone might say, well, you have XX, that's a sex, XX, so XY, that's a sex, right? That's what we typically think of female and male. I've had people say all of the intersex conditions due to chromosomal aberrations are also unique, distinct sexes. So XXX, XXY, XYY, basically all of the different ways in which in that part of our DNA that the chromosomes can get kind of wonky, either through deletion or addition or splicing. Things can go wrong there. And someone will say, well, we see you have XX and XY, they're different. So they're different sexes. So therefore, if you have three X's, that's an altogether different sex. So that's a third. And then XXY, that's a fourth, and so on and so forth. I've heard people try to make those kinds of arguments before based on the chromosomal aberrations. But they're chromosomal aberrations. The problem is you're trying to treat something that can occur within nature as if it's normal and therefore definitive, something that defines what it means to be human. Like you can find something like the six-fingered man on Princess Bride. We wouldn't say that humans have six fingers on their right hand. Can it happen? It can, but it's a deviation from the norm. It's actually in the terms, like there's a lot of unbeneficial mutations that can occur. There's a lot of aberrations and anomalies and things that can occur within nature. And someone will say, see, therefore it's natural, therefore we define humanity this way. When, in point of fact, there's normative biological outcomes by which we come to judge the deviations and determine that this is actually not what is intended by the teleology of evolutionary biology, for instance. To apply the language of assigning sex, respectfully, it's like a factory error on a production. Yes, it is. And respectfully, I was telling my wife about this the other night. So you have a product that is coming down the conveyor belt, and there's a lot of product that's coming down. But there's certain defects and things that quality control has to look for. That doesn't mean that they're discarded. This doesn't mean that human beings with a defect like Down syndrome, for example, who have an extra chromosome or something, I forget what it is, in a very specific spot, we know exactly what causes Down syndrome. Very specifically, we know exactly how. But you know what's scary? There's people who will kill a child in the womb because they happen to have an extra chromosome in this one spot in their DNA. But are we killing intersex people in the womb too? They happen to have an extra chromosome in another spot. Are you going to start, recommending abortion if we do a complete DNA makeup of a child? It's completely unheard of. But somewhere else, because the chromosome might be over in this other slot in the DNA, oh, they have Down syndrome, and so we're just going to kill it. It's absolutely absurd. Even from like a scientific standpoint, we just can't do that. So it doesn't make it an entirely new thing. It's a one-off oddity and something pre-existing. In this case, either male. Yes, yeah. I was talking to my wife about that. It's almost like people want to say. Now, let's be honest. So somebody who actually has a condition like Down syndrome or something like that, we recognize something went wrong in their DNA. We're compassionate. We're sympathetic. That's not how most people are, right? We're not going to redefine humanity based on an aberration. In fact, we know it's an aberration because it's a rare occurrence that deviates from normative biological outcomes. That's how we assess anything. That's how you take a scientific approach to these sorts of things. It's the same thing for what mental health is. That's why we have the DSM-5, a diagnostic tool to determine deviations from the norm of what is considered mental health, so we know how to treat it. Right? It's something to be treated. It's not something to be embraced and normalized. Hey, consuls, welcome in. I've been discussing that very subject in one of my philosophy classes. It's Sick and Immoral. It's taking an individual and saying there is a lesser human being, they ought to die because they're not good enough. Yeah, in the case of, what was it? One of the Scandinavian countries said something to the effect that we have completely eliminated Down syndrome. And what they meant by that is they have aborted all Down syndrome babies, and so therefore they don't have Down syndrome living among them. Can you explain why I have to park a mile away because of all the handicap parking? A mile away. See, I am actually one of those people who like to park away from all the vehicles in the back of the parking lot. Because number one, I like to walk. And two, I don't want to be around other vehicles because that's when I start getting hit by other vehicles. Yeah. If some people on the left have their way, they'll just euthanize all of the handicapped people, and then we'll just all sit there. Jamie has armor, but no, it's the Catholic view that we love and care for people as long with food and water, as long as their body's still going. We're gonna continue to care for them. That's why the Terry Schiavo thing was such a big issue, because they basically starved her to death. No, I didn't hear it. What happened to did something happen to Zallard? Wait a minute, he did? Is he alive? He's Mr. Super Punch Out himself. I used to talk with Zallard a lot. He is alive. Okay, good. Okay, yeah, he was. I helped him reroute a Super Punch Out for a speed run, a single segment runs. And we did a lot of back and forth and stuff. And I really like Zallard. Super healthy person we have known for years, and then all of a sudden a heart attack. Like, where does it come from, right? Yeah, that's kind of scary. Um, I I now run 5Ks and things like that. I try to get to the gym as many times as the week I can, even if it's just to run a mile. Not like super fast. I mean, like a 11-minute mile kind of thing, and no, 11 to 12-minute mile, maybe two, sometimes three. Because my mom had a heart condition. She died at 53. She's been dead now for like 14, 15 years. She died when I was 27. So she didn't get to enjoy her retirement or any of that stuff. That's super young. But in the case of Zallard, I had no idea. Wow. Well, my huge condolences to him. I'm sorry to hear that. It's not cool when something stops working right. Because when something stops working, everything is just gonna just die, and it's sad. You know. Now, if we can get the artificial heart that Picard had, and put that in Zallard, that'd be good. We have pacemakers, we have heart replacement surgeries, but man, to have that happen so early, I bet that really changed this. Oh, was it like one of the consequences of the mRNA vaccine? Because I know some soccer players and some other kids, like 10 and younger, were having these issues with, um, according to, yeah, I'm going to be honest. Listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I know we've literally got one page in this, which is fine. We can talk about this instead. I'm perfectly happy with that. I enjoy it better. Um, I'm not a conspiracy theorist and stuff like that, but this is a new type of shot that people were getting. We don't have long-term studies. That makes me really very hesitant. I never got any shots. The COVID shot, never did. I'm still skeptical of vaccine being redefined in the midst of this. It's not what I've always typically thought of when I thought of a vaccine. So I'm just very just hands off. Hey, I don't have any comorbidities. I don't have any issues. I'm healthy. I'm young. I don't have one foot out of the door. Uh, I think I can go without getting any sort of shots, let alone fourth or fifth boosters, which, what? We don't have to get into all the details and all of that stuff. All I know is that I haven't been very outspoken about it because people can make their own decisions and stuff. And plus, a lot of people were kind of like silenced and all of that kind of stuff. But I'm like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. I'm healthy. I don't have to take risks. Anytime you put something that's foreign into your body, you're engaging in a risk. You're taking a risk. Some people who take a drug that may have been on the market for years can still die from it. There's a certain tolerance. If 1 in 1 million people die from a drug, they may still approve said drug. It's just, it bothers me. But yeah, that's a shame. If you take 20 Fauci ouchies. And I'm not saying that's what Zallard did. I don't know his particular condition. I think Zallard probably would have been fine. I mean, he seems young enough. Am I? I'll just make sure I'm okay. Yeah, okay. I'm actually mixing two people in my head. I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, but something funny he did was he got the real Mike Tyson to fight. Oh yeah, I remember that. The game Mike Tyson won. Yeah, I saw that. Dragon Ball. I saw that. Or Captain. Yeah. And welcome in, Dragon Ball. Good to see you. Reactions you heard were bad. Yeah. Captain says, yeah, I'm not taking Dr. Fauci's sketchy vaccine. It's made out of dead babies anyways. Okay, so from a Catholic perspective, all right, this is a very important point when it comes to like vaccines and stuff like that. There's very specific medical ethics that goes on in the question of whether or not somebody should get a vaccine and what particular vaccines. If aborted fetal tissue is used, if existing stem lines were used, with stem cell research was utilized, which, as I understand it, most of the makes of the vaccine used it not only for the making of the vaccine, which was less, but still some did. Many of them used existing stem cell lines as for research purposes. So there were very few vaccines that I, as a Catholic, could actually consent to because of the participation in aborted fetal tissue. Hey, Savage, welcome in. All the studies have been in place since the early 80s after Professor Malone invented it. That's all I'll say. Fair enough. Console says, as for approved drugs, we all see those class action commercials about people taking prescription medications, so even approved stuff from years ago is showing up to be causing issues. Absolutely. Absolutely. Long-term studies is always better. Like, for example, some of the using the hormone blockers and cross-sex hormones and stuff for kids and whatnot. People are saying, well, these are approved drugs used for these other things. Yeah, but they're not approved for this. We don't have any long-term studies of using puberty blockers on children, and even then, medical intervention is to restore the health of the individual, not to suppress natural biological development. There are cases where children start puberty too early, like at age 8 and stuff like that, and that could actually be harmful. So sometimes that's suspended for a little while, but it's to help with the normal progression of what's normative with children. It's not to suspend it altogether and chemically castrate people. Dragon Ball says, I was looking at some of the news articles about the mRNA. They have been talking about using it to vaccinate livestock. No. They have also made it so mRNA can penetrate organs and inject themselves into humans from drinking milk. You know, I'm reminded of a quotation from what's the name of the guy of Microsoft? For some reason, I'm drawing a blank. He's very pro-vaccine. Bill Gates, that's right. That there was a quotation by Bill Gates when he was talking about vaccines, and he was talking about population control, and one of the things in which he spoke of was vaccines, and all the other examples were being used of keeping populations lower. That was kind of scary the way he said that, you know. I think people need to be very cautious on how they talk. That's for sure. But yeah, that was a creepy quotation, really. I grant that maybe he misspoke or something like that, but at the same time, he's very big on keeping populations lower, supporting contraception and stuff, which the Catholics can't do. We don't support any form of contraception. But yeah, that's kind of interesting that they want to start putting the vaccine in. See, I don't drink cow's milk, so that's cool. I don't know. It's really silly. Number one, I don't find it all that tasty, but I don't drink milk substitutes either. I mean, I suppose I could drink like rice milk or almond milk if I really wanted to, but I generally don't have milkish kind of like products. But I stopped drinking cow's milk, and because I heard an argument one time and it just stuck in my head, and I just never modified my view, and that was that human beings seem to be the only creature on the planet who is drinking milk outside of infancy, let alone drinking the milk of some other animal. Somebody made that argument one time. Somebody said that to me, and I thought, well, that's fascinating. That is true. Within nature, we naturally drink milk in our infancy, and we cease to do that at some point. Not only that, but it's not found within nature where we're consuming the milk, some animals consuming the milk of some other animal. But yeah, okay, so this is really funny. It's I don't think it's green, it's blue milk, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's blue milk. Luke Skywalker, and he's got that creature with those large teats and whatnot. You know, it's really funny. There was this how it should have ended video on YouTube, and he goes over to one of the animals. He's like, I'm gonna take one I'm gonna get one for the road. He goes in there and starts squirting the blue milk into the cup, and he starts drinking, and it's dribbling down. He looks at the creature. He's like, I'm gonna miss you the most. It's disturbing, but so funny at the same time. The the depopulation is part of the Great Reset by the World Economic Forum. Bill Gates, George Soros, and their bullies want global communism. I don't doubt that. I hear a lot of stuff about. Isn't the World Economic Forum the place that wants us to eat the bugs, eat the grasshoppers and stuff? You know what's interesting about that? When I first heard that talking about it, it reminded me of John the Baptist in the Bible, who ate locusts and honey. And I thought to myself, he must have needed a lot of honey if he was going to be downing them locusts. Because I highly doubt those locusts were too tasty, right? Them tasty locusts. Sounds like he was drinking ground up Smurf juice from a blender. And yes, the bug munchers. Yeah. Aren't they doing like cricket powder now? So trying to use cricket powder and put it into things. What's the even point of that? Why? Z will eat the bugs. That's right. The German accented. Who is that? Michael Knowles likes to do that. I wish I could do voices. That would be so awesome. Like Steven Crowder is so talented with the voices and stuff like that. You know, it'd be really cool to have like a broad range of accents and things like that. I always find that to be part of the amusement or the entertainment of some of these political commentators. I enjoy it very much, actually. No, actually, I literally have only 2 pages left, so this works out perfect. As a matter of fact, this works out perfect because this is not even like a full chapter. It's literally like 2 pages here. German is an amazing sounding language to hear. Everything sounds mean, especially when you say it like loud and assertive. You know what's interesting? I had a professor, a New Testament professor. He was teaching me New Testament Greek, Koine Greek, and he went to school in Holland. And I think he had to learn another language, and I think he decided to learn German, so he could read other theological works in a different language. And he said that the German language actually has very little exceptions in its grammar. He said, grammatically speaking, it's very perfect. Whereas in English, there are so many exceptions to things. But in the German language, there's this is what he told me. Whether it's true or not, there's very few exceptions in German grammar, which is actually pretty cool, to be quite honest. Um, the study of language has really helped me think about things like in Greek, word order is not used to determine the way words are used in sentences. Didn't know that. In English, we start with the subject and then we end with the object and so on and so forth. But that's not how it is in Greek. There's just different forms of the word, and you have to know what form of the word that's being used. And that tells you how the word is functioning in the sentence. Therefore, they're actually free to use word order in Greek for emphasis. It's like when we put something in italics, for instance. They can actually just do that with their language. I thought that was very interesting. But German is a really cool sounding language. It wasn't offered at the high school I went to. I wasn't there for very long, but they had French and Spanish. They didn't have German. I probably would have taken German because I have a German on both sides of my family. So I think that probably would have been pretty cool. So to apply the language of assigned sex, using that language to children when their bodies are clearly male or female is a linguistic maneuver by gender theorists. It's the changing words, changing minds. Right? How you frame all this stuff makes a big difference. Despite the binary nature of human sexuality, gender theorists treat every child as sexually ambiguous. Sorry. Margaret McCarthy summed up their intentions well. Quote, "It is as though we are all effectively hermaphrodites, regardless of our anatomy or any other physiological makeup." End quote. Supposedly, all that a parent or obstetrician can do is assign sex based upon their best guesses as an external arbitrary authority, but if sex can be assigned, it can be reassigned. This is the ultimate motive behind adopting this language. For a child whose sexual development in utero is typical, doctors and parents are not assigning a child sex. They're recognizing a biological reality that was determined long before the child's birth and identifying it. As Dr. Paul McHugh explained, quote, "The language of assigned at birth," quote, "is purposefully misleading and would be identical to an assertion that blood type is assigned at birth. Yes, a doctor can check your blood type and list it, but blood type, like sex, is objectively recognizable, not assigned. In fact, the sex of a child can be ascertained well before birth." This is actually a very interesting thing. I haven't heard the blood type thing before, but this is true, right? Yeah. Let's see. Jesus is sitting with his disciples, telling them the Romans don't believe he is the Son of God. Disciples say, "No way." Jesus says, "Yahweh." That's a good one. I like that. Listen to you with your religion jokes. I like it. According to biologists, Sex can be defined by the type of mature reproductive cells or gametes. Neuroscientist Dr. Deborah So explains, quote, contrary to what is commonly believed, sex is defined not by chromosomes or our genitals or hormonal profiles, but by gametes, which can mature reproductive cells. There are only two types of gametes, small ones called sperm that are produced by males and large ones called eggs that are produced by females. There are no intermediate types of gametes between egg and sperms. It is not a spectrum. Well, I mean, you're not going to have one gamete or the other unless there's actual chromosomes that dictate that's how it works. How does Moses make tea? How does he make tea? Moses. I'm trying to think of something in Moses' life that would be relevant to tea. All right, you're just going to have to tell me because my brain is not picking it up. The classification of human as male and female is not arbitrary, as one physician replied to the New England Journal of Medicine's article about eliminating, quote, unnecessary legal sex classifications for children. I'm a pediatrician. The growth curve for male and female babies are notably different. Am I just to give up on tracking normal growth and development? Fair enough. Therefore, the language of assigning sex should be rejected. Similar terms should also be questioned. For example, the term born male or born female can undermine the stability of sex. Was a person any less male before he was delivered? Hebrew. I think I've heard that one before, but the thing is, my brain just couldn't come up with it. That's funny. Can a man cease to be male at a later point in time? What is so extraordinary about the moment at birth? For some reason, this seems to be a really big issue with people. They're like, well, you can kill it before it's fully out of the womb, but once it's out, it's infanticide or something. It's for some reason, something really super and magical happens. Like the day before, you could kill it, but the day after, no, you can't do that. Like what? And really, the magical point of it is it's no longer attached to the woman. And the argument is the woman has a right to do whatever she wants with her own body, even if it kills somebody else. Which is kind of interesting. That's like a woman not breastfeeding her child, and the child just dies because the woman's not feeding it. God really likes coffee. Hebrews 24:7. It's a joke. Yeah. You folks are funny. I like good joke. Hebrews. So this is for some reason that seems to be a really big thing. But what's important to note is that human nature, even after birth, is dependent upon somebody. They're not completely self-sufficient just because a baby is born. A baby will literally just lay there, crap itself, and die if it's not taken care of. So it's still dependent on people. But gosh, it's like there's the case of premature babies. They're born weeks in advance. They're babies. In a debate, Michael Knowles was talking to this woman, and she was basically saying that she, as a medical professional, she wants to use language that will distress the patient the least. So if she doesn't want the child, it will be talked about as it is a fetus. if the woman does want it, then she'll talk about it as a baby, which fetus in Latin just means offspring. So, I mean, like, whatever. It's really sad. Like, these people who say a woman has a right to do with her own body whatever she wants. Listen, pregnancy is its own thing. Okay, I'd be the first one to stand up against somebody who raped a woman. I think he should be castrated. He should be locked up for the rest of his life. This is one of the most heinous things that a man can do. He should be protecting women, not raping them. Like when it comes to like a woman just consenting to engage in sexual reproduction, that's for her to do. Like, that's not something that's to be forced upon her. But once a woman decides to enter into the marital embrace and engage in sexual reproduction, women ought to be taught, as we all understand, that if you engage in the act of reproduction, you are now responsible for any consequences to that act. Because that's the natural consequence of engaging in reproductive behavior. So this is not about controlling people. It's about encouraging them to do morally and ethical things. And we generally want to discourage people from engaging in killing the babies that they have consented to form. Now, some may... This is why I'm totally against contraception. So I was working with a guy at Nazarene Bible College. He was my supervisor. He told me a story. He said his wife was on the pill and he was wearing a condom, and that's how their son was born. My argument is if they were using no contraception at all, they would have known, they would have understood her cycle, the biological effects of ovulation and the ramping up to ovulation. There's actual physical ways, not just testing body temperature, but there's actual ways of testing for, sorry folks, cervical mucus and stuff like that. One can actually know. They would have known. Isn't that interesting? If they would not have been engaging in any contraception at all and just learned about their bodies, they would have known not to engage in an act at that time. Isn't that a lot of control? She was doing all this stuff thinking that they were controlling their reproduction. What about she was not on the pill? Well, no, she should not be doing that. She should not be engaging in those sorts of things. Just give me a moment because we're having good conversations. I want to hang down here for a little while. Yeah, so there's actually a lot of things that people probably shouldn't be doing, and not probably, but definitely shouldn't be doing, I should say. But most of it has to do with just taking responsibility for your actions. People want all the pleasures they can get and separate them and try to control consequences from those things. You know, as Knowles often says, some people conceptualize freedom as the guy who's shooting heroin in the street. Like, he's doing what he wants to do, is he? I mean, I'm pretty sure that his brain really wants the heroin hit, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't want to be addicted to heroin. You know, that's not true freedom. What even is the point of Papa Murphy? They cost more than the places that cook it for you. I, I'm gonna be I'm ignorant here. Is Papa Murphy like a pizza place or something? I don't know. Some people want to pay a lot of money for trash. Oh, okay, okay. I think I remember now. So yeah, assembling pizzas, you take and bake. Okay, I get it. You, as a family, it's a family thing, right? It's an event that you do as a family. You assemble the pizza and then you cook it and then you eat it, but it costs more than someone who just actually cooks. Maybe it's that family experience. I personally haven't. I think maybe we did that once. It was a gift or something. No, it is already assembled. Well, see, it's not a make a bear or something. You just bake it. You know, I like whatever. I'm out of ideas. I'm trying to make excuses for these people and trying to be charitable. But that's not even an appeal. We just have to bake it ourselves. I mean, if you go to like Little Caesars or some place like that and get one of the hot and readies, they weren't baked that long ago. In fact, if you go there during busy times, you're almost guaranteed to wait 10 minutes and actually get a freshly baked pizza, and it's still a little too hot when you get it home. Do that. Makes perfect sense to me, right? Sex is such a stable reality that thousands of years after one's death, and for all eternity, the fact of being male and female persists. Even government agencies such as the United States Selective Service acknowledge this when they declare that for the military draft, quote, U.S. citizens or immigrants who are born male and changed their gender to female are still required to register. Individuals who are born female and change their gender to male are not required to register. Isn't that interesting? And it is true. I mean, when you find a skeleton, you can actually do testing on it and you can determine if it was male or female. Was it part of the female component or male component? Sexually dimorphic. Sticks for life. I have not yet utilized that. The slices and sticks. I haven't seen that. Not going to it. These hot and ready are still the best deal. Crazy bread too. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we probably grab a hot and ready like once or twice a week. To be honest, we like pizza. Maybe it's the Italian in me. All of these crazy theories. It's like we want something to be true and then to just reason all around it. You can be very convincing. You can be very convincing. Woke Pittsburgh professor denies differences. And what? Yeah, I bet. I bet. An anthropology professor denied the difference between male and female bone structure during a speaking engagement. Seriously. Well, that's kind of weird. Like, you can't test the bones. Well, all kinds of things are being claimed. A lot of things are being asserted, but let's be honest now. If this professor is proposing something like new or different than what was already known, then why was it already known if it wasn't true? The point of the matter is those bones were the product of a DNA process. And what? Wait a minute. What? Yes, I want more followers, please. Not the chat bots, though. You could leave those. You have the lowest price of all competitors? I like it. I like a cheap date. Yes. All right. You keep telling people that. I think every religion requires faith. It's like a recreated religion. Every religion requires... It depends on what you mean by faith. Are you talking about requires blind faith? Well, here's the thing. In terms of... there are religions out there that don't have historical claims. One of the things about Christianity that would make it the easiest to disprove is if the bones of Jesus would just show up somewhere, all of Christianity would collapse. Like the skeleton thing is just faith in the face of facts. Oh, I see what you're saying. It is a secularism is a kind of faith, even with the new gender theories and stuff. It's a kind of religion. Some people might not really think of that, but it's kind of like atheists saying, well, "I'm not religious." Well, let's remove the word religion for a moment. Let's set the word religion over there because it's apparently hanging you up on something. An atheist is someone who simply follows the philosophical proposition that there is no God. A theist is a person who maintains the philosophical proposition that there is a God or gods or, whatever. So it's just a different philosophical proposition. I don't care what you use with the word religion. It's a different philosophy, but it's a philosophy nonetheless. Atheism is as much as a philosophy as theism is, and theism is as much as a philosophy as atheism is, philosophically speaking, in terms of propositions that we can make. It's the rhetoric that is used. Well, we're just non-religious. No. You're just proposing different philosophy. That's all. But I wouldn't say that Christianity involves when it comes to faith. I think in terms of trust. I don't think in terms of blind adherence. I don't think Christianity invites us into blind adherence. Okay, there are historical claims that are made. Crucifixion of Christ, the resurrection of Christ, the early church, all of these things. There's an actual rooting in history of a man who lived and died and so on and so forth. There is in what the Catholics refer to as the heresy of fideism. It's this idea that you cannot demonstrate God's existence by means of reason alone. So therefore, you have to just have this kind of blind adherence to things. But that's kind of weird, isn't it? How then could God judge any man if he just randomly places his belief in something and ends up being wrong? Like, how is he supposed to know? His reason doesn't tell him otherwise. There's literally no basis for judgment. Not all creatures have a sexual nature as stable as humans. Although most organisms do not change their sex, some kinds of animals do. Oh, this is very interesting. I heard this before. This is not talking about human nature. It's about a goby fish. We're not goby fish. So quit trying to treat us like goby fish. The goby fish, if the dominant male dies or is removed from a habitat, the largest female becomes male. If the male is reintroduced into the habitat, the female who had replaced him as a male reverts back to a female and is interested once again in mating with him. A small fraction of less than 1% of animals possess this capacity, known as sequential hermaphroditism. For the bluehead washfish, the metamorphosis, including the outward appearance and ability to produce sperm cells, takes only a few days. Similarly, some plants reproduce asexually, while others can even change their sex based upon environmental conditions. However, even in the case of these fascinating creatures, sex is understood the same way as it is for humans. Sex is defined by how an organism is organized for reproduction. Therefore, male and female are not like two colors among many. Rather, the two sexes are intelligible only in relation to one another. They become aware of their own uniqueness only in light of their complementarity. One discovers oneself in the other. A man's body is naturally ordered toward fatherhood, and a woman's toward motherhood. Some might counter, then what about people who are infertile? Infertility does not negate the fact that humans are a sexually dimorphic species. In fact, it supports the fact. For example, if a man is unable to become pregnant, it's not because he's infertile, it's because he's not a woman. Just as no man can gestate, no woman can fertilize an ovum. Even in the case of men and women who have intersex conditions, they cannot self-fertilize. Like all other people, they can either impregnate, become pregnant, or if they're infertile, or if their fertility is not functioning properly, they can do neither. Well, once again, it's a case of something's just not working right. It doesn't mean that they don't have the right plumbing and it's not naturally ordered to that end. Something went wrong. For some reason, we have a culture who just doesn't want to acknowledge that something in nature can go wrong. I'm not saying that we treat these people poorly or anything like that. That's like treating a cancer patient less than human just because they're dying, or something went wrong. All right. We still acknowledge that there are cancer patients who need care. It's okay to acknowledge that something went wrong and we could seek to treat it. That's fine. We want to bring the body back into normal functioning. Normal functioning. We see this thing with people being called fat phobic. That if somebody is morbidly morbidly obese, that it's mean to simply acknowledge that this can incur greater health complications. Can it occur within nature that somebody could become obese? Yes. Is it the ideal weight for them, or what is considered healthy for them? No, it's not. Now, people may be obese for various reasons. So when we see an obese person, we don't immediately think that they're lazy. We don't immediately think that they're less of a person. We treat them like a person. We get to know them. There could be various factors as to why they might be at this moment obese. That's not to say that it's not necessarily their fault. Maybe they're very depressed. I get depressed. They decided to eat in their depression. I may do something different, right? But the thing is that we're not going to treat obesity as if, oh, this is just perfectly normal. This is just perfectly fine. This is healthy for you. You can't tell people that. It's like telling somebody who's anorexic, like, no, you're right. You're too fat. You know, I can't see all the way around your clavicle bone. You're right. You have to lose more. I'm going to be the first person to stand there. Just, man, you dropped 5 pounds. Respect. No, we can't do that. We absolutely can't treat people like that, because we're watching people just spiral right in front of our own eye, because we don't want to call a mental illness a mental illness. Just call it a mental illness. You're not being mean, people. You are not being mean by lovingly telling somebody in conversation. You're talking to your friend, like, dude, you're like downing 12 beers a day. I'm going to tell you right now, within X amount of years, you're probably going to experience liver failure or something like that. I love you. I'm willing to let's talk about it. Like, why are you doing this? Can we get you running or something? Start enjoying the runner's high or something. Whatever. You need a replacement. You need to replace this somehow. Being fit and athletic is white supremacy. Let's see. The white supremacist origins of exercise and 6 other surprising facts about the history of U.S. physical fitness. Dude, you got ridiculous articles for everything. What is this? How did U.S. exercise trends go from reinforcing white supremacy to celebrating Richard Simmons? This Time magazine, this stuff is trash. This stuff is just trash. The things that are coming out now. Listen, okay, I get that our culture. Trust me, I wish I didn't have ridiculous article links. You and me both. You and me both. It's scary, isn't it? And I think perhaps what they look at, they'll look at a culture and they'll say, well, the average weight of a woman in this culture is such and such, and whatnot. And listen, don't get me wrong. I'm not highly attracted to stick figures. They remind me too much of 13-year-old girls. All right, I'm more attracted to the full-figured, voluptuous woman who actually has hips, and I mean, she's attractive, right? She's got curves, not obese. All right. Hey, welcome in. And so I like for me, okay, that's fine. That's just talking about attractiveness and stuff like that. Some people might have various attractions, but when it comes to like health, though, just because we see something in a culture doesn't mean that what they're doing in that culture is actually healthy based on, scientific observance. There is an ideal weight. Now, when I say ideal weight, I'm not talking about an exact number. I'm talking about there's a range of health. And at some point, it starts to move into obesity. And this could, your weight, like listen, if I was a doctor, your present weight is posing specific health risks to you. You are more at risk for certain things for having this much weight on your body. That's perfectly fine. There can be all kinds of things that would prompt a doctor to say, this thing that you're doing actually puts you at greater risk for certain diseases. Maybe you're smoking 3 packs a day. I think it's a valid thing for doctors. That's what they do. They try to look at what you're doing. They try to look at all your metrics and everything and try to recommend to you a healthy way forward. The Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm. They shouldn't be lying to us. They should tell us exactly what's going on. Just looking for Catholics, and thank God, found some people. Well, yeah, well, welcome in. Yeah, absolutely, welcome in. This is a very interesting platform that I've chosen, um, mainly because most of the people, it seems, on Twitch are Protestant, and I'm going to be honest. Most of the people who are in my chat end up being at least God-fearing individuals. I may not always have diehard Catholics in the chat. Some are Protestant. I think I have a guy who subscribes to my channel who is a Mormon. I'm not a Mormon. I have critiques of Mormonism, of course, because I'm a Catholic. I wouldn't be a good Catholic if I didn't, critique that which is contrary to Catholic teaching. But yeah, so tonight we've been going through Jason Everett's book. If you don't have this, you should definitely get this. It definitely speaks to our culture. So we've been reading through this, and we've been talking about various subjects, which worked out quite nicely because tonight I only had like 3 or 4 pages that I wanted to read and reflect upon. This is part 4 of Jason Everett's book. Pretty much everything that Jason Everett does is just extraordinary. He's worked with teens for a really long time, if you don't know who he is. Teaching the John Paul II's theology of the body, and he's been teaching this stuff to teens for decades. So, very brilliant and brave individual. I could say that. But yeah, absolutely. Hang out and follow, do whatever you want. Let me see. We were talking about the goby fish, how it is their nature to change from male to female. You know what? As soon as I heard this, I thought of Jurassic Park and the frogs, the frog DNA that they used in order to fill in the gaps in the DNA for the dinosaurs. You remember that? They used some East African frog that actually would change from male to female in same-sex environments. This is the same case here, that there's a small fraction of less than 1% of animals possess this capacity known as sequential hermaphrodism, where they can actually change, which is very fascinating. If it is their nature to do that, you know what it isn't. What nature doesn't have that capacity? Human nature. Human nature doesn't have that capacity to do this thing. If it did, we would be having totally different conversations. But that's not the biological trajectory of human nature. We're sexually dimorphic, so we don't have this capacity to switch from male to female within single-sex environments. We don't. And I don't think it is appropriate to look at the nature of another thing and say, therefore, it is appropriate for human nature because we can find this within nature somewhere. That's not how that works. Human nature is its own thing. We do according to our nature. Those things do according to their nature. So it doesn't matter if we can point to an example of something that occurs in the nature of something else, because all we can say is what we can say about the nature of that thing. We cannot conclude that therefore we can just do whatever we want with our nature. No, our nature actually has a teleos. It has an end towards which it needs to be directed. So male and female were complementary. That's fine. We don't have to be offended by that. I almost think that some people take this kind of people want a, what's the word? This word is escaping me this word is escaping me. It's will, arbitrary will, anonymous, autonomous. A kind of autonomy when it comes to anything and everything. Like my perception, my reality, this consciousness as much as I want my consciousness to be like scouring the universe and the cosmos, and it's tethered right here. This is how God made me. This is my reality. I resign to this structure. I design to this system in which I am in. The oldest philosophy is, ye shall be as gods. That somehow we can throw off all inhibition, throw off all structure, all order, and we can just become pure will. This, the word again, escape me. Autonomous will, free from all constraint. We can define anything that we want, define it however we want, be whatever we want. That is a life without meaning. Yeah, I started to take my faith seriously, and Jesus has changed my life forever, as he does. Absolutely. I've seen and heard things that I'm so blessed to have seen. What I've seen. Sorry for going low. No, absolutely. No. See, the whole point of this the stream, it's focused more on the chat. It's when the chat grows quiet and I just monologue about something, or I read something to keep myself going. So I continue to talk about something, because otherwise you're going to get dead silences and hums and hums and everything else, because I'm thinking. But no, this is what I do. I read, I comment, I dialogue, and there's cases where I never get to the book because there's so many awesome, wonderful people with great ideas, and we just have fun all night from chat. That's why I do this live. Otherwise, I would just read into a camera for YouTube or something. So you don't have to apologize for that. It's super chill in here. We talk about everything. So yes, we are organisms that are organized for reproduction, the gift of fatherhood and motherhood. Okay, so where are we? Okay. Here. Okay, so infertility does not negate the fact that humans are a sexually dimorphic species. So often some people will say, well, if you define a woman as someone who gives birth or something, what about infertility people? Are they not women? But these are non-starters. Because what a woman is defined by many, many different things. If something goes wrong with the woman, it doesn't make him any less than a woman. She's a woman. All right? Something went wrong. She's infertile for some reason. This can happen with men. Some men can be shooting blanks. We've heard that expression before. All right? It doesn't make him any less than a man. Something's broke. Something's not working right. This happens. Like in the case of somebody who's really young who has a heart attack. That's unfortunate. There can be a valve issue. There can be electrical impulse branch issues and stuff like that that's going on with their heart. Things can go wrong with human nature, but we wouldn't define human nature based on those defects. And just because we're saying that something is defective, like a defective heart. My mother had a defective heart. She had to take medication for it because she had a valve issue in her heart, and she died at 53. If she hadn't had that defect, she probably would have lived a lot longer. But it's a defect. Something went wrong. She needs medical care to help her with that. That's what medical practice is for, is to help guide us on the path towards health, which is defined in a very specific way, so we get normative outcomes. We can live longer lives. We have healthy functioning organs, everything functioning according to the way it's properly ordered to function, right? So God created us one way, going to the other way and identifying as something else. It's not God's plan. Right from a Catholic perspective, this is absolutely correct. If we don't follow his will, we will lead ourselves into a trap that was placed by Satan that sadly so many people fall into. There's a lot of demonic deception going on. A lot of demonic deception. The thing is it wouldn't be deceiving if it wasn't convincing. If it wasn't convincing at all, at least to some people, it wouldn't have that deceptive power to it. It would be simply dismissed, not something that would be toyed with. We all sin, but when something like this happens, it needs to be taken care of, and it's never too late to change. Yes, there's actually a lot of people who are desisting in their gender dysphoria. Most people do desist when they experience this in their youth. And it makes sense that people would experience it because their body's actually changing. There's a hormonal difference that's going on. When children reach the state of puberty, there's a new flow of hormones that are going through the body like it wasn't prior, right? This is what brought puberty into place. This is what jump-started it. And so the secondary sexual characteristics begin to kick in. Body hair starts to grow. All kinds of changes, particularly for girls. There's breast development for males, penis enlargement. There's greater interest in sexual engagement. There's all kinds of things that are going on and changing with the way their bodies are functioning, the way they're thinking about things, and it can be very unnerving for some people. I have utmost sympathy for any difficulties that people are experiencing through these things. And there can be confusions that people experience. Most of that stuff, though, does desist. You do learn to resign to your nature. You come to accept what you are, either as the male component or the female component of our sexually dimorphic species. There could be all kinds of things that can go wrong with this process that makes it abnormal and even more difficult. These cases require patience, love, and compassion, and they are like children in the womb. They're some of the most vulnerable people in our culture because this is what demonic forces do. They prey on the most vulnerable among us. They prey on the unborn. They want to abort them. They want to prey on our young children, pervert them with sexual immorality, and want to mutilate their bodies, right? And they want to hone in on these weak moments of children where the reason is not even fully developed, and they want to just pervert they want to pervert them so badly. It's all demonic. Catholics can see it. Those who are actually fully formed in the biblical worldview, or are fully formed in Catholic sexual ethics, and have their consciences formed by Catholic teaching, can see this. They can see exactly what's going on. The vulnerable among us are being perverted, and demonic forces are trying to destroy life and mutilate it. And it's so deceptive and so insidious. And you can only say so much. You can only do so much, and you just watch civilization just crumble around you. Watch the world circle to the drain. You gotta pray for these people. Those who are the most susceptible to the deception, those who just soak it in and parrot it out, it becomes part of their reality, becomes part of their identity. It becomes like their religion. They think they've finally found themselves, but they haven't. They're just going through a difficult time, and they needed proper guidance, and they're not getting it. Instead, they're getting indoctrinated. They're getting indoctrinated in ideas that draw them away from what they truly are. As of now, I'm only 14, who was confirmed about 4 months ago, and I've seen so many people in my grade level. Yeah. So you're 14 years old. Okay, yeah. I was just thinking terms of I was thinking of terms of service for a moment. Um, you can have your own Twitch at 13. I think it is. So yeah, that's fine. I do sometimes, because we're talking about sexual ethics and stuff like this. Sometimes there's mature content, but you're always welcome here, and I try to keep it. It's hard to keep it PG. It's like PG-13, but you're of age. Yeah, there's a lot of things. So I was a substitute teacher in high schools. Sometimes I did middle schools, but I gravitated away from that because, as you may know, middle school kids are very loud, rowdy. They question authority. It wasn't enjoyable for me. So I gravitated towards high school English. So I helped substitute teach for 2.5 years. And every school I went into, some of them had pride flags, some of them had the Gay Straight Alliance or Gender Sexuality Alliance, I guess whatever they wanted to call it that day, I don't know. There were flyers in the hallways and stuff like that. So children, even at the middle school level, are being drawn into thinking this way. The thing is that when somebody thinks a certain way, there's terminology, there's a language that's being used, right? There's definitions for those terms that are being used. It shapes the way a person thinks. This is why education is actually very important. I'm not one of those people who think we just need to teach you how to think. No, I also believe that we need to teach people what to think, because there are better ways to think. Not just better ways of thinking, but there are better ideas. So I firmly believe that Catholic sexual ethics speaks to our culture on so many different levels. This is why it was very important, even when during Pope Paul VI's promulgation of Humanae Vitae was just vitally important. Everybody thought that the Pope was going to say, okay, contraception is okay now. You can contraception, have all this, the sex you want, have all the pleasure you want, no consequences, completely divorced from the teleos of the act itself. We're gonna separate the unitive and the procreative principle of the conjugal act. No. He maintained his position. He maintained Catholic teaching despite what the culture was hoping for. That is what we need to do. We need to stand firm against the culture. Unlike some of these kids in your schools, you are being catechized by Catholic teaching. And that is going to make a huge difference in your life, helping you navigate all of the pitfalls and all the immorality that is out there. It's not to say you'll never make a mistake or make a bad judgment. It means, though, that you have a roadmap to navigate around the minefield, the ideological minefield that can leave us maimed, right? But some of these people, they don't have that. They absolutely don't have that. Pray for them. If there's a way to start a club at school, to do that, make friends with people and talk with them, but make sure that then they know that you love them as a person before, because a lot of times people get the feeling that they're just being talked at. So I think it's very important, particularly when it comes to issues like this. There's a lot of gender talk nowadays, and people are being catechized by the culture. They're being catechized by TikTok. They're being catechized by gender activists, transgender activists on YouTube. This is where they're getting their information from. This is where they're getting their ideas, and they're thinking with these words and these definitions and this language and these concepts. And what ends up happening is that takes precedent, and how they interpret themselves, how they interpret others, how they interpret society as a whole. It's meant to redefine everything contrary to traditional understandings of morality, and like what a baby is being defined. Marriage is being redefined. Everything's being redefined. It's all being molded in the minds of the progressives, throwing off every restraint. That's what Marx said. It's the ruthless criticism of all that exists. We must tear it down. It's a thread of the Marxist plan. No, it's all right. I've heard so many things. I've seen my fair share of demons work through them, and I can see it clearly. And when I come to those types of people, the first thing that happens to me is that they are very, very rebellious. But it's the throwing off the restraint, right? Yeah, of everything. But I have been able to change people's points of view, and I've even started to convert one of my friends who is an atheist his whole life. Oh, very, very awesome. That's the things that we are thinking, particularly up to, like, say, age 25. These are vital years. These are formative years. These are the age. This is where we are going through our earliest development and thinking. Some people think you become an adult at 18, but there's studies that show that even up until like age 25 for males, the frontal cortex is still developing. I think studies show that females they mature a little bit earlier, and so on and so forth. But it's vitally important that we are put on the right path very early on in our lives. It sounds like you're in a really good spot. I celebrate your life. That's absolutely awesome. You said confirmation, right? Yeah, confirmation 4 months ago. Absolutely. Well, you're in the right place. We definitely, I can help encourage you here. And if you ever have any questions or anything, be free to ask. And I like to be an influencer and an encourager and do what I can to help make an impact and help people develop in their Catholic faith and make a difference in their own lives. So it's a very beautiful thing, to be quite honest. Let me read just one more paragraph here. But if a person's procreative potential is impaired by age or disease, like for instance, this is another thing that when it comes to defining a woman is, well, what if she's infertile because she's reached the age of menopause? What's kind of fascinating is I was reading a biology textbook once, and they said we actually don't know why a woman begins menopause. See, in the female brain, there's like a chemical that is released that actually causes development for the release of eggs of the of the ovaries, for example. And for some reason, at some point in time, once a woman reaches a certain age, the brain is no longer stimulating that response in the ovaries. Her ovaries are actually quite well. This is why sometimes you can have a 70-year-old that ends up becoming pregnant, because she ends up ovulating and drops an egg in her old age, because she actually still has functioning ovaries. The brain is just no longer triggering this response to continue to happen. Some scientists think that this is has an evolutionary explanation, that it protects the woman who in their old age, number one, older eggs have a tendency for greater defect. Not only that, but pregnancy in older age can have greater risk to the health of the woman. So it makes sense that it makes sense, at least from an evolutionary standpoint, that there would be some sort of protection for them. Unlike the males who continue to be fertile their entire life. You can be 90 years old and you're still fertile. But likewise, but because he's older, there are greater risks for birth defects because he is older. The process of putting together those DNA packages is just not as efficient as it used to be. So that there is greater possible for chromosomal defect and stuff like that. But yeah, so if a person's procreative potential is impaired by age or disease, this does not make the person any less male or female. It simply shows that the potential that they have for reproduction cannot be actualized. If fertility was a prerequisite for determining one's sex, then no one could know their own sex prior to parenthood. Thankfully, long before then, one's sex can be determined by how one's body is organized for reproduction. All right, so that brings us to chapter 5, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 7.5 pages. No, we'll say 7 pages. The claim that will be responded to next is intersex people prove that sex is not binary. And we did talk about that a little bit this evening when we were talking about how some people were making the argument that there's XX, there's XY, and he began to list all these other ones like XXX and XXY, XYY, and all these different variations. And he's like, these are all different sexes and whatnot. I'm like, no, these are chromosomal aberrations. This is like how we end up with Down syndrome if the aberration occurred in a different slot in the DNA. I mean, this is not a good thing. It actually ends up causing Klinefelter syndrome and Turner syndrome and various other issues. And that's just looking at chromosomes. That's to say nothing about whether or not one has androgen insensitivity disorder and things like that that could cause a male to actually not even develop as a male, because they're insensitive to the androgens, and so they end up with female parts down there. A lot of different things can happen, but they're not different sexes. Something went wrong. So we'll talk about that next time. It's late here, so I've hit close to the 2 hours. Thank you so very much, everybody, for your participation in chat this evening. It always makes it more enjoyable for me to come down here and invest 2 hours of my life talking with all of you and philosophizing about life and the things that are going on in our culture and going through these different books, various types with all of you. It's been, it continues to be one of the joys of my life. It's very fulfilling, and I greatly appreciate your participation. And so with that, God bless everybody. Stay well. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so the reason why I was able to convert my buddy was because I've been talking with him about God for a while. It could take a while, yeah. And a couple days ago, when we were having a sleepover, he was zoning out a lot, and at one point stopped talking and sat up in silence in the corner for about 2 minutes. And to snap him out of it, I put a rosary over his head because I knew something wasn't right. After that, he got up and looked at me with almost shock. I think I saw hell. I think I know what you're saying. Praying for people is very important. The rosary, the Dominican order. If you ever see a Dominican brother, they wear a rosary on the right, on their hip. It's like where you would find a sword and a hilt. of like a Roman soldier or something like that. The rosary is a very powerful tool. Petitioning our mother is a very powerful thing. So yeah, absolutely. I think so sometimes when people wake up in the middle of the night, I've woken up in the middle of the night sometimes, and depending on the nature of the dream, I feel like there might be something in the room and stuff like that. Oh, is that right? He told you to visit hell. When I was I want to say 15 or 16, I had a really bad dream where it looked like a hell landscape. There was really torturous and gross, disgusting things that were going on, and I remember it being a very vivid dream. I've never forgotten it. I'm now in my early 40s, and this was a dream that I had in my teens, and I've never forgotten it. And it's just a absolutely horrid depiction of just twisted flesh and depravities, and it's just so disturbing that it just burned itself into my brain, you know. And I can't say that was an immediate turning point in my life, but I can say that I think there was spiritual forces that were definitely at play, because that's when I was just trying to get interested in Christianity. I was listening to the New Testament, an NIV dramatized cassette tapes that I would play and listen to while I fell asleep. But I was also struggling with addiction and this obsession with this girl and this other stuff that was going on. And I think there was a real spiritual battle that was going on for what was going to be the trajectory of my life. You know, prayer is very powerful. He said there were bodies laid on top of each other. There was just screaming. I told him that was God warning him to come home. Hey, you know what? Fair enough. Fair enough. Some of the saints have visions or depictions of hell in their writings, and it's stuff like that, to be quite honest. And sometimes God definitely allows us to have visions, have dreams, and things. I don't have a lot of visions personally, but I have had some dreams that were so vivid, that seemed so real, and they just were very powerful. Like this one that I had, this depiction of hell. And yeah, I truly believe. Now, here's the thing. I'm like I said, this 25 years later, I'm still talking about it. That's impact. That's influence. And I can tell you that it still has an effect on me personally. So yeah, God definitely does. We see, there's a precedent for it in the Old Testament and in the New Testament for visions and dreams. We need to be cautious with those. They are private revelations. Nobody else are required to believe that they are true, like public revelation. This is very early on explained in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. But for the people who receive them, they can have very powerful effect. They certainly should be handled with care as to the source of the dreams, particularly when it comes to the need to interpret the dream. It becomes even more subjective. But even then, you know, if we just keep an open mind with the church's teaching in mind, that'll help guide us through the more subjective experiential aspects of our faith that we often encounter. So good on you for praying for your friend, and for his openness for actually sharing that with somebody else, because that's very that must have put him in a very vulnerable position. So I do need to get going. Very nice to meet you. Hit the follow button so you get notifications when I go live. And we'll definitely talk again. Absolutely. You can come in here anytime I'm live, and you'll get that notification if you follow, and we'll continue to be friends, and I'll continue to enjoy having you around. So once again, everybody, good night, God bless, and we shall see you again.